Hello everyone, and welcome to my review of Fire Emblem Engage.
Hiya, papaya!
As usual, in my review, I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the And at the end of today's video, I'm also going to be talking about how it compares to Three Houses. If you've never played a game before, which one should you get? I'll talk about the pluses and minuses to each of these games. This review is going to be for the game without the DLC. For me, because I know I'm going to replay these games again and again, I like to have a first playthrough with no DLC. So that way I can see what the core game is like. And then, now that I've completed the game, I went and bought the DLC now. So yeah, I'm going to play through a second time with the DLC. And then after I complete my second playthrough, I'll probably do a review of the DLC. In case you've never played a Fire Emblem game before, the gist of it is your party is on a chess-like board, and then you move around the board and fight enemies one by one. As you play through the game, your characters will gain experience and then level up, and there's a big focus on the connections within your army. So in between the battles, you can watch cutscenes where the people in your army, they're going to talk to each other and form bonds, which then helps them in battle. Now that we got that 30-second summary out the way, let's jump right into the review. So we're starting off with the good, and the first good thing about this game is the characters. There are a lot of characters that I really like in this game. I feel like the protagonists are really cool, and the antagonists are also really cool. There's a bunch of characters in this game that I really, really like. The second thing about this game that is really good is the map design. There's a bunch of different types of maps. Coming after Fire Emblem Three Houses, which had really boring maps, this is really good. For me, I like playing a wide variety of maps, and this game definitely delivers in terms of that. They have maps that have different styles. They have maps that have different things that happen to you as you're going through the map. Yeah, this game does that really well. The third thing about this game is that the replayability of it is very high, which is a very good thing. I think a lot of the more recent Fire Emblems, they've kind of struggled in that aspect. In this game, it's not perfect. Like, there are a few other things that would speed up just a little bit, but in general, this game is a step in the right direction. Everything can be done on a menu where you jump right to the different activities in your home world. There's much less time spent in between battles, and a lot of the other things that are outside of battle, they're really optional. They're not like things that if you don't do them, you're going to be feeling the consequences of them throughout the entire game. There's none of that, which there was, in Three Houses. In this game, it's much more chill in that aspect. If you don't want to do the outside of battle things, you're not really forced to do it. Whereas in Three Houses, it was kind of like if you don't do the things that are outside of battle, it'll kind of cripple you a little bit. Some people like that extra challenge, but for me personally, I didn't like all of the extra stuff. And the last thing that I'm going to put firmly in the love or good category is I loved seeing old characters from older Fire Emblem games be remade in 3D and come with full voice acting. Also, this girl Ivy, she knows how to make an entrance. Let's end the good section by watching her make her grand entrance.
Princess Ivy, speak for the Illusian throne. I will now take your lives, your souls, and the rings.
Okay, now we're on to the bad. Actually, there's only one thing that I'm going to put in this category, and that is the beginning of this game. When I first started playing this game, I was kind of on the fence about it. I actually was going to do a first impressions video, but I was actually so conflicted when I started this game that I didn't make a first impressions video because I didn't want to come out saying, I liked it and then ended up hating it. And, I didn't want to come out saying, oh, I really don't like this and that. And then I come back again and I'm like, oh, actually, I do like it. Because the beginning of this game it does not put its best foot forward. The characters that you get in the beginning of the game, they're not so great. You get 3 characters right from the very beginning, and these characters, they all kind of have the same like gimmick personality, where they're obsessed with you, the Divine Dragon. I think they were trying to be funny, but to me, it just comes off really a little bit cringy, I think I would say. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the twins or Vander, personality-wise or looks-wise. I feel like they're all really boring.
This is so frustrating!
And then, yeah, just everything about the beginning of the game, it starts off really weak, I would say. The first few maps, they're not very exciting. The characters, they're not very exciting. The story, it's like the very typical setup that you get for most of these games. So when I first started playing this game, I was really worried because, yeah, it's not a very strong start. That being said, once you get to about chapter 6 or 7, that's where it starts to get good. And for me, this is definitely a problem because Fire Emblem games are a lot about building your characters up, slowly getting stronger over time. But if you don't really want to build up and connect with the characters from the beginning of the game, then every playthrough, you have to use these first characters in the first few maps. So every playthrough, you're going to have to be using these characters in the beginning. And most of these characters, strangely, they don't do well in the mid-game and the late game. It's like as the game goes on, you get characters that are better and better, both like personality-wise and gameplay-wise. It's really weird the way that they did the balance. But yeah, once you get to the mid-game and then the late game, they're both really, really good. So I think it more than makes up for the weak beginning. Okay, and then in the last category, the category, we have 3 things. The first thing is the graphical style and like the art style. I have to say that I personally was not a fan of it initially. It's kind of really heavy anime, really heavy, more like cartoon-esque, which is a big contrast from 3 Houses, which was a little bit more on the serious side of things. But yeah, I guess this is just personal taste. Like maybe you like the art style of this game, maybe you prefer 3 Houses, it's up to personal taste. Number 2, I think this is something a lot of people would put in the bad category, but for me personally, the storyline was it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, because if you go on like Reddit and GameFAQs and a few of the other fan places, you'll see everybody say it has an awful storyline, great gameplay. Awful storyline, great gameplay. But I don't know. I think it's kind of too much to say that the storyline is just awful. I actually think that the storyline is not the weakest Fire Emblem storyline, and it actually is good in certain places. I definitely think that the storyline is not amazing, but it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. And the last thing that I'm putting in the category is the complexity level of this game. So I really like the Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem games and also the Teleus games. I think those were like the peak of the series. To me, that was like the perfect level of it's complicated versus it's simple. And then for me, in 3 Houses, I didn't really like the battalion system, that whole thing. I kind of just liked like the base game, so I mostly played just kind of ignoring the battalions, which I know, it's kind of missing out on a certain aspect of the game, and when you want to do the harder difficulty levels, you really have to, understand that system. But you can definitely go through the game completely ignoring battalions. However, in Fire Emblem Engage, if you ignore the engage aspects of the game, it's going to be really difficult for you. For me, my first playthrough, again, like as I said, like the weak beginning, this game has a lot of different complicated systems in it, and the game doesn't really do a great job of describing them to you. For example, it took me a long time to realize that the different classes are then set into different kind of categories where the character will get certain bonuses depending on what class they're in. So, for example, there's covert units that are going to get additional avoid when they're on certain tiles. And then there are backup units that are going to perform a chain attack when you are attacking. And for me, I didn't understand this for the first like half of the game. And so I was like, okay, why does sometimes my units can do chain attacks, but sometimes they can't? So yeah, that's another layer of complication that, I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe I should have checked into that more as I was playing the game. But yeah, I didn't really pay too much attention to that in the beginning, but the more you play the game, the more you realize it's really important. So don't be like me. If you play this game, you know, try to read and understand these systems as you go. The other thing that is really complicated is the different emblems. As you're playing through this game, you're going to get different emblems. You know, probably every few chapters, you're going to be getting a new emblem, and every emblem has its own special abilities, and it has its own special attacks, and it's going to teach you different proficiencies, and like there's a lot. And, you know, getting each of these emblems, then you're going to have to go through, okay, this is the new emblem that I got. Okay, let's look at all of its different abilities. And then thinking about, okay, which emblem am I going to give to which character? Like, it's a lot. And yeah, as I said, with Three Houses, you could kind of like ignore the battalion system. But in this game, you can't ignore the engage system. Like, you're definitely going to need a few of these abilities to do the more complicated levels. So what's my final verdict? My final verdict is this is a very strong Fire Emblem title. I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10. It's a really great game. The graphics are really good. There's a lot of good characters. There's great gameplay, and there's a high replay level. The only things that I'm not a huge fan of are, as I said, the beginning and the storyline isn't the greatest. If this game had a better first few chapters and a better storyline, I probably would give it a 10 out of 10 because the gameplay is really good. It's a lot of fun, but yeah, it has a few slight flaws that keep it from getting a perfect 10 out of 10. Okay, so finally, we're going to be talking about how it compares to Three Houses. Which one would I recommend to you? Gosh, it's funny because the first time that I played Fire Emblem Three Houses, I thought it was the best game ever. But the game kind of has 4 routes, but they're all really similar. The first half of all of them is basically the same. You just have different characters. And then the second half of the game, there's only really, honestly, 2 routes, I would say. Because 3 of the routes, they're all very similar. So you might go into Three Houses thinking that, you know, you can play through it 4 times, and each playthrough is going to have a lot of new content. Like, you will see a few new scenes, and maybe you'll have a few different characters that are in your party, but actually, for the most part, it's the same. And me, and I know a lot of other gamers as well, we got really sick of the monastery the more times that we played through the game. I personally think that they should have only had the monastery in the first half of the game, and in the second half of the game, just, you know, map after map after map, you know, with cutscenes in between, but no monastery. But they didn't. Like, each playthrough, you're gonna have to do a whole month each time, and I was done with it by the end of it. And for me, it's harder to go back to Three Houses than a lot of the older Fire Emblem games, because the older Fire Emblem games, it's just like map after map after map, nonstop action. But Three Houses, there's so much stuff in between each chapter. Fire Emblem Engage is much better in that aspect. You could go battle to battle if you wanted to, with just minimal amounts of management of your items and maybe your character's classes, things like that. But those are the same things that were in the older Fire Emblem games as well. In Fire Emblem Engage, there's no fetch quests, and everything can be done in a menu where you just hop right to where you want to go. So, which should you get, Fire Emblem Three Houses or Engage? I think there's only 2 cases where I would say go with Three Houses. If you're only going to play the game once and then you're just going to like one and done it, then I would actually say Three Houses, because the first playthrough of Three Houses is really strong. It's really great. If you're only going to play the game once, I would say get Three Houses. Also, if storyline is very important to you and world building is important to you, then go with Three Houses. If you want really good gameplay and you want a game that has a lot of replay value, then I would say go with Fire Emblem Engage. After I finished my first playthrough of Fire Emblem Engage, I'm now doing a second playthrough, and yeah, I kind of like the second playthrough a little bit more. That's kind of the joy of Fire Emblem games, well, most of them, is that each time you play them, you appreciate them a bit more. You know, your second time around, you can try different things with your characters, use different characters, that type of thing. And Fire Emblem Engage, it's a good game to replay. So for me personally, all in all, I would say I prefer Fire Emblem Engage just ever so slightly to Fire Emblem Three Houses. And on that note,